Now we move on to question 29 in the name of Deputy O'Snuddy. 30 seconds to introduce.
Well, Margaret, the intention of this question is to ask the Minister, given that he has now received the O'Toole investigation report, the Minister's attempt, I believe, to fudge the issue, and that Christopher O'Toole clearly states that the issues raised by the whistleblowers could not be adequately dealt with. Will he now set up an inquiry into the virtually non-existent health and safety regime in the Air Corps in the past, a regime which allowed the hundreds of men and women in the Air Corps to be exposed to highly toxic, dangerous, corrosive, cancerous chemicals which compromised their health and possibly caused early death or premature disablement of up to hundreds of people?
Thank you very much.
Welfare of the men and women of Óglaigh and Éireann are a priority for me, and that is why I ensured the protective disclosures alleging exposure to chemical and toxic substances were investigated by an independent third party. The review's report has indicated that, given the breadth of the remit of the terms of reference, he commented in general terms on the Defence Force safety regime. It must be remembered that prior to the receipt of the disclosures, litigation had been initiated in relation to the subject matter of the disclosures. This therefore complicated the approach to be taken in developing any parallel process. Notwithstanding this significant challenge, I put in place just such a parallel process. In light of the legality and complex situation, I believe it is appropriate that any experienced legal profession was appointed. It was the view of an independent reviewer that the courts are best placed to examine issues in relation to the allegations which were already subject to litigation. This is so given the historic nature of the complaints and significantly that it potentially affects the reputations and good names of individuals. What the report shows is the difficulty in putting a parallel process in courts in place. The report also notes that the HSA are the appropriate statutory body to deal with such allegations. I have furnished the report to those who have made the protected disclosures, and before considering any further steps, I will await their views. Separately, and in parallel to the independent review, following an inspection in 2016, the Air Corps has continued to work with the Health and Safety, the HSA, to improve its health and safety regime. I have been informed by the military authorities that the HSA has formally noted the considerable progress made to date by the Defence Forces towards implementation of the safety management system for the control of hazardous substances. Subject to the completion of the improvement plan, the HSA investigation is closed. However, it must be noted that the Air Corps health and safety is a matter of ongoing monitoring, supervision and adjustment.
Thank you very much. Deputy, 1 minute.
Minister, court should not prevent the state or you as Minister from investigating the generality of what we have been discussing and what in fact is before the court by a small number of serving officers. Minister, I want to set the scene. A dilapidated mechanics workshop, oil everywhere, carcinogenic chemicals spilt on the floor or around the sink, highly dangerous long-term or long-life chemicals being poured into the grass area next to it, chemicals mixing, causing plumes of toxic smoke, broken equipment, no storage area, and in particular no respirators, overalls, gloves, etc., capable of protecting those ordered to handle these dangerous chemicals. No wash facilities, chemically stained clothes being washed at home along with in the same wash as kids' clothes, men falling around due to inhaling toxic chemicals, being disciplined for being off sick, having headaches, and then, more seriously, clusters of highly complicated medical conditions, miscarriages, birth defects among those who worked in those conditions. This is what the whistleblowers asked you to look into, and that in fact it went on for years. There was, there is, and there still seems to be a cover-up of the health and safety recommendations which would have dealt with those work conditions if they were acted on when they came. When will you set up the full forensic inquiry which Christopher O'Toole said would be needed to establish the veracity of the statements from the whistleblowers, or are you going to wait for the courts to force you to act?
Minister, 1 minute.
Let me state, Deputy, this has received a lot of discussion here on parliamentary questions, and it absolutely it deserves the discussion that we have had over the last number of months, specifically on this issue. This is an ongoing issue. And as I've stated to the previous Deputy, Deputy Chambers, that I met with two of the recipients. They brought up a range of issues and concerns to me. I have prioritised this in my own office and in my own department to treat these people with the utmost respect. The reviewer has given me a copy of the report. I passed it on to the Defence Forces. I got legal advice on it, and I have now sent it to the people who made the protected disclosures. And I await their feedback from the reviewer before I consider what I will do next. And let me state that because of the health and welfare of the men and women of the Defence Forces are an absolute priority for me, and I ensured that protected disclosures alleging exposure to chemical and toxic substances were investigated by an independent and third party. I think it was only fair that we would get an independent person to come in, that we would give them the terms of reference, and I specifically looked at we would have the terms of reference as broad as possible for the independent reviewer to be able to do his work and not to limit him in any way.
Thank you. Final minute.
Earlier, you basically called the reviewer in question incompetent for not raising issues with you. So, kind of whatever the remit, the reviewer looked at said he wasn't competent to do it, and you seem to agree because he didn't come back to you and ask for an extension of the remit or a broadening of it. Minister, if I said to you that there was 100 premature or untimely deaths caused possibly because of this exposure, would you agree that there was an urgent need for the state to immediately set up an inquiry? There isn't 100 cases before the courts. There are thousands of people who could have potentially been affected. Students who worked on the complex, children, they were in the state care when they started in the Air Corps, some people. Officers, their families, who were also exposed because of the transfer of chemicals. This is surely a scandal that needs investigation, similar to what has gone on in other jurisdictions where the same practices occurred, where there was no health and safety regime. Minister, will you once and for all accept that this is a scandal, it needs to be addressed, and those men and women that are still surviving, that need medical care and protection, that they get that immediately, first and foremost, regardless of anything that is before the courts?
Minister.
I had every confidence in the independent reviewer, and I never questioned his authority. And Deputy, I don't want you to put words into my mouth, because I have every confidence in the work that the independent reviewer carried out. He is a professional man in his own capacity, and he carried out the review within the terms of reference that we set out for him. The issues raised are a number of the issues that the Deputy has raised are subject to prior litigation relating to the period of 1991 to 2006. As such, it would be totally inappropriate of me to comment further on the detail of these cases. And in relation of historic matters, as litigation has commenced before protected disclosures were made, the report states that the courts are the appropriate forum to consider such matters, and it was the view of the independent reviewer that the courts are the best place to examine these matters. Given the questions involved, the historic nature of the complaints, and significantly that it potentially affects the reputations and good names of individuals. However, when I have the views of those who made the protected disclosures, I will consider any appropriate action and further steps once I hear back from the people who made the protected disclosures. But one thing that I did do and wanted to do was that I don't want to be accused of hiding behind anything or anybody or any document, that I put the independent reviewer's report up on the website, and that is for every deputy in this House to see. Very easy for me to say no, you're not getting
Thank
a
you,
copy
Minister.
of the. And in conclusion, Cathaoirleach, it had been very easy for me not to do that and to hold back the report before questions are not to allow you to ask me questions on such matter. I don't want to be this. I want to be very open, transparent, and to give people an opportunity to see exactly what the independent reviewer has said.